within real-world clinical trials, and within health economics and simulation modeling, with an outline of the potential process and awareness of the potential resources to support patient engagement on the methods cluster projects. And then there'll be an opportunity.
Your call cannot be completed as dialed.
I'm wondering if people can mute their lines while we are. It keeps getting louder or quieter. Thank you, Heather. I've got technical support with me, so they're working on it as we speak. But thank you for letting me know, Heather. So at the end of just sharing a little bit of information, this is meant to be fairly high level. There will be an opportunity to ask questions.
To continue in English, press 1, followed. Enter your access code or meeting number, followed by pound.
Or can we mute all participants? Okay, thank you. Okay.
Enter your attendee ID number, followed by pound. If you do not know your attendee number, press pound to continue.
We're just muting all the external lines right now. Our apologies. Okay, thank you. So as you know, the methods clusters, the mandate is to advance the evidence base for the scientific methods used within the context of patient-oriented research by fostering communities of methodologists to engage in discussions and collaboratively undertaking projects. The reason why we're sharing this slide again is because this session is going to be recorded for future project teams within the methods clusters when they are starting out on their projects. So I know that each of the individuals on the line today is familiar with all 6 of the methods clusters. But today's session is particularly relevant to the 12 projects that are moving forward in health economics, real-world clinical trials, and KTIS. So there's 5 projects moving forward in knowledge translation and implementation science, 4 in real-world clinical trials, but 2 of them are embedded within one sub-theme, and 3 in health economics and simulation modeling. There's a total of about $1.3 million in funding between the 12 projects, and at the moment of funding, there were about 60 people involved. Within the last couple of weeks, however, that number has grown as the projects have launched and more people have become engaged. As you know, we have sought diversity in geographical distribution, university affiliation, partner organizations, seniority of scientists involved with the projects, and methodologies. However, the current, as we move the projects forward in the other methods clusters, such as data science and patient engagement and patient-centered measurement, we're aiming for even greater diversity in these criteria. So what I want to share with you today is the proposed process for supporting patient partners on these projects. So it is an expectation for each of the methods cluster projects that there will be patient partners who are engaged throughout the research process. Each project team that is involved in today's webinar are in different stages of this 4-step process. So this 4-step process looks at pre-engagement, before patient partners join the team, recruitment of patient partners, orientation and training of patient partners, and then ongoing support for those partners. This process was developed in concert with the patient engagement coordinators in our different regional centers, under the direction of Colleen McGavin, who is our patient engagement lead for the support unit. So let's look a little bit more at each of these 4 phases, which is the first column that you see in front of you. And I'm just going to mouse exactly where this is. So if we look at the pre-engagement phase, The primary responsibility for this, i.e. who the research team contacts to establish, to work in this phase of patient engagement, is myself, the Methods Cluster KT Specialist. And as you know, I will be leaving this position at the end of December, and there will be another person taking over this role, and that person will be responsible for being the primary contact for the pre-engagement phase of patient partners. Now, what this task looks like is to have an initial discussion with the members of the research team, particularly the PIs, to collect information to inform the recruitment request for patient partners. So we have this wonderful template that's been developed over time with our regional centers under Colleen's guidance, which captures the key information that patient partners like to see in order to inform whether this particular project would be a good fit for them as far as their interests and as far as their skills. Once we've filled in that initial information, that information is then used to help to recruit patient partners. So now we're in the second phase here. This phase is done in concert with the Methods Cluster Specialist and the support from the regional center. Now, what I mean here is that we have 4 regional centers, as you know, the North, the Interior, the Island, and Fraser, as well as the hub duplicating as Vancouver Center. We use the information that we generated in this first step in pre-engagement to help to create a recruitment request, which can then be disseminated by various mechanisms. Many people are familiar with Patient Voices Network. That is one method to recruit patient partners. But you may also be familiar with patient partners from your own fields of research or your own networks. It's perfectly fine to recruit patient partners through mechanisms outside of the support unit. However, we ask that that initial recruitment notice be on the branding, utilize the branding of the support unit, and that we work together in creating the key information for that recruitment request. When I talk about regional center support, some of the projects cross different regions. They're partnerships, for example, between Northern and Interior, or between Interior and Island. In this case, the default regional center will be the center where the PI is located. If it's not possible for any particular reason, maybe because there's less capacity at that regional center at the time, there will be the possibility of working in the other regional centers where there is capacity. The third phase here, orientation and training, this is a shared responsibility. Again, the primary part of it will be with the regional center. So wherever the PI is located, that will be the primary contact for helping with orientation and training for patient partners and for other members of the research team. And I'll talk about this in more detail in a few minutes. And examples of this would be helping to facilitate orientation and training using a number of different resources that are available that I will show you in a few minutes. Once the projects are launched, once the early pre-engagement has been done, patient partners have been recruited, they've been oriented and trained, and other members of the research team have also been oriented and trained in patient-oriented research. Then we move to the final phase, and that final phase is ongoing support. The desire here is that that ongoing support for patient partners comes from within the research team, so that somebody is identified within the research team for that patient partner to contact for any questions or concerns that they have as the project moves forward. That does not mean that the research team does not continue to get support from the Methods Cluster KT specialist or the regional center. It just means it's like triage. If the support can be provided there initially, great. And if there are questions that arise or situations that arise that it would be helpful to involve the Methods Cluster KT specialist or the support from the regional center, that will also be possible. So let's talk a little bit more about what that initial orientation has been like, or could include. So remember, in order to get to this stage, there's been the pre-engagement, the questions to fill out that template, and then there's been recruitment of patient partners. The third phase is then orientation. Possible components of that orientation could include introductions, an overview of the project. So as many of you know right now, the PIs that are on this call, the proposals that were submitted for the work plans aren't at this stage in user-friendly lay language. So now would be an ideal time, if you haven't already recruited patient partners, to do a lay summary of your project that we can use in the recruitment notice and also use during the orientation. There's also training that's possible on patient-oriented research. So there's a national curriculum, and there's individuals trained in the support units in the regional centers to provide either the entire national curriculum or specific components of it, depending upon the needs of that research team. There's also support for discussing what the potential roles could be for the patient partners. So one of the common questions that many of the project teams looked at or were discussing in the early phases of the project development is sorting out what potential roles could the patient partners have, particularly in methods projects. There are a number of resources available that help to suggest potential roles for patient partners to explore in each phase of the research project. I have access to those particular resources, as do the support people in the regional centers. So I'm happy to share those with you. It may also be important not only to share potential roles, but also help to develop a skills and interest matrix for the patient partners. So patient partners might have particular skills, whether it be in math or communications or whatever their professional area or experience might be. But they might also have interest in developing new skills, or they might not be interested in utilizing one of their existing skills. So that matrix can be developed to help identify for patient partners and the teams which roles are most meaningful for the patients to contribute on that project. It may also be valuable to include in the orientation the development of terms of reference. And we do have examples, templates available that can be created and morphed for your particular project. So if that's something that you wish to explore, then please let me know. We can also help to facilitate the discussion about communication mechanisms. When, how to communicate, whether the preferred method is by email, by WebEx, by Skype, by FaceTime, and there's supports available within the regional centers and within the hub itself to enable that communication within your project team. And finally, but not least, the orientation could include a discussion around compensation. Each of the project teams has identified in their budgets opportunities for compensation for patient partners. There's tremendous experience within the support unit and the regional centers in how to convey that information, when to convey that information with our patient partners. For example, is the compensation offered at the beginning of the project? Is it offered intermediately, at the end of the project? When should the discussion take place? Is the compensation, generally what we recommend is that compensation is offered and patient partners can choose to accept or to decline it. If they choose to accept it, that it's offered in various formats and they can select which format, whether it be a gift card or a check, they prefer. And then there can be a discussion about whether that's best provided in intervals throughout the project or whether that is best provided as a lump sum at the end of the project. And there's relative advantages and disadvantages in each of those, and we can walk you through the advantages and the disadvantages. I'm wondering if I should just stop here for a second. Can we take everybody off mute and see if there's any questions before we move to the resources?
People can also use the chat function if you prefer. So people can unmute themselves as well if they want to participate.
So I'm looking to see if there's any comments in the chat box or to hear if there's any questions. Okay, hearing and seeing none, I will then move on to the next slide. Oh, I just saw hi, Allison. Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's from the before.
Oh, it's from before. Okay. So after the orientation then, can we get back to advancing? There's a number of resources that have been collated and or developed within the support unit and the regional centers to help with this. For example, we have pre-engagement checklists that identify those specific questions that help inform the recruitment notice. We have that template for recruitment notice. We have a number of resources that help identify potential roles for patient partners in the research process. We have information on budgeting. We have the support unit patient partner appreciation policy. We have a workbook that can be utilized, or portions of that workbook, developed by a postdoc working with Dr. Linda Lee, Clay on Hamilton, that teams could use portions of, if they so chose, to help in the process of better engaging or more meaningfully engaging their patient partners on the project. And then we also have in the support unit a specialist, as you know, John Ward, that can help the teams to evaluate their engagement of their patient partners, both from the patient partner point of view as well as from the project point of view. So again, I'm going to stop and see if there's any questions. Please either unmute yourselves or type in the chat box.
Allison?
Yes,
Oh, you can hear me.
I can.
Oh, sorry, it's Linda. I think I have to double unmute myself.
Okay.
You can hear me. So a quick question about the orientation support and all the resources. Are they available to patient partners if we identify them outside of the support unit? So you mentioned that we can identify these patient partners from our existing network and collaborations. So can these patient partners also access, the resources that you talked about earlier?
Excellent question, and I'm pleased to say absolutely. The intent is to ensure that we're building capacity throughout the province, with not just on our research, our scientist level, but also our patient partner level. So all resources are available. In order not to be too daunting to our project teams, both the researchers and the patient partners, we're not distributing this material as a lump, as a cohesive unit, but rather the KT specialist for the methods cluster and the regional support people will point you to specific resources that might be more appropriate for each project, because some projects require, for example, one of the real-world clinical trial projects involves analyzing an existing data set in a different way versus a much more involved process of comparing different consensus methods in one of the KTIS projects. So patient engagement would look quite different in that real-world clinical trials project than it would in that KTIS project. So this is a long-winded way of saying whatever you need will be available to any member of the team, but rather than distributing it widely as an entire toolkit, will help you to pick out the ones that are most appropriate for that given project.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Are there any other questions? Okay, I'll just move on a little bit, and then we can, I'll just click back on this slide. So what are the next steps in this process? I encourage each project team leader to contact me individually in regards to where you are in this process. So if we go back, if you've already recruited patient partners, then we don't have to worry about that pre-engagement phase or the recruitment phase. If, however, you haven't already identified your patient partners, then the first step is for me to help you to create that recruitment request. And then the second stage will be to work with the relevant regional center to help to distribute it. Once the patient partners have been recruited, then the next step is for the team lead to contact me to help set up a time for appropriate orientation and training that is relevant for that given team. I'm going to stop and ask, I see that Colleen is on the line. Colleen, is there anything that you wanted to add at this point that I may have missed?
Hi, Allison.
For the description?
No, I think you're doing a great job. That's probably why there are a few questions. You're just doing such a thorough job of explaining everything.
Thank you, Colleen. Okay. So I don't see any other questions in the chat box, and I'm not hearing any other questions. And I don't like to belabor people's time unnecessarily. And since the next steps are all now very individual for specific projects, I think we can close this session. And I invite you to contact me individually and we'll take the next steps for your project. So again, thank you, and I also want to congratulate each of you for being a part of this exciting initiative as far as methods projects supported by the support unit. So thank you all and have a good weekend. I hope to hear from you each soon.
Thank you, Allison.
Thank you.
Thanks, Allison. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Bye.